In this Hogwarts Legacy video, I'm going to be bringing you guys 3 more cosplay builds that you can play while playing Hogwarts Legacy. These are Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, and Draco Malfoy. Before we get into the builds themselves though, big shout out to Warner Brothers for sponsoring this video. If you guys haven't picked up Hogwarts Legacy yet, you can on PC, Xbox Series X and S, and PlayStation 5, and you can use our link below to support the channel. So first, let's get into the Hermione Granger build. This is a character that is very difficult to make in the character creator, but you can get pretty close to it in my opinion, not too far, and the voice actually sounds somewhat like her. And if you are picking this character or trying to roleplay around her, you would obviously go Gryffindor House if you're going the whole cosplay route, since that's what she is in the books and movies, but you don't necessarily have to, as it doesn't affect the gameplay much in any way. Taking a look at the spells that we have for this build, we actually have 3 damaging spells and 1 control spell, which might actually come as a little bit of a surprise since that's not typically what you think of when you think of Hermione. But we do have 3 of these spells here, and let's get into those. Those are Expelliarmus, we have Bombarda, and we have Confringo, as well as Leviosa. So taking a look at Bombarda first, people may be wondering, why is this in this build? Well, she uses this spell in the Prisoner of Azkaban movie near the end to free Sirius from his cell. So we add it here, and this spell is really good for AoE damage. If you grab people with Levioso, and then you throw Bombarda into the middle of them after you have the talent for Bombarda Mastery, it makes it explode, and it just sends enemies flying, and a lot of times they fly into stuff and take extra damage from things they hit. So that works really well, this combo together. As I mentioned, we also have Levioso in this build. This is used to levitate enemies. I feel like this would be something that Hermione would be good at, considering her penchant for Wingardium Leviosa. So we have that in this build, and because we have Leviosa Mastery, you're going to be able to grab multiple targets, lift them into the air, and then, as I mentioned, Bombarda is a great follow-up for that. And it's good for just taking a group of enemies out of the fight, or, setting them in a position where they can take extra damage as well. Next up, we have Expelliarmus. This is a spell that Hermione uses a couple of times in the books and movies to disarm people, including Draco. So we have that in this build, and it's really good at disarming melee weapons from opponents. For instance, goblins or pensive guardians, and if you have ancient magic throw expertise talent, which we do in this build, you can then take their weapon and throw it back at them mid-air. And then lastly, we have Confringo here. Hermione tries to destroy one of the Horcruxes with this spell, so that's why we have it in here. So now we have 3 attack spells, and Confringo is really good at obviously dealing with undead because you need a fire damage source to deal with them. It's good at dealing with spiders. Spiders seem to be weak to fire. A lot of them, if you hit them when they're low with fire damage, they'll start running around, or if you interrupt them with a fire attack, they'll kind of like freak out. It's really good for that. And getting the Confringo Mastery talent makes it so that if you hit a target, it'll fly to other targets. So it's really good at spreading damage around. Hermione also uses Petrificus Totalis, so there is a little bit of focus on that spell in this build. That means you're going to stealth around sometimes and use that on targets. It's not something like that's a huge focus for her, but it does give you the option to kind of go into stealth and take out enemies systematically before popping off your spells. And when it comes to talents, we basically have the standard talents here, ones that you would find in other builds, like basic cast mastery, things like that that reduce cooldowns or increase your damage, or just, generally build up your ancient magic meter, ones you would find in just about every other build. But we also took a couple here in the Room of Requirement tree in order to give you some potion expertise, effectively, like the Urdis potion, making it so that you're invulnerable when you use this potion and reflect projectiles back. I feel like Hermione, because she's so clever, would use potions very effectively in combat, but not necessarily all the time like something like a Snape build would use. So we have a little bit sprinkled in there as well. And when it comes to traits on her armor, I like to put Concentration 3 in her pieces because this increases the damage of all of her damage dealing spells. And since she has 3 of them here, that benefits her probably more than any other build. And that brings us to Ron Weasley next. This is obviously another Gryffindor build. If you are a Gryffindor fan, he's another one. If you want to do a perfect cosplay, that's the house you pick. Again, you don't necessarily need to. And the character creator gets a close likeness of him, in my opinion. I think the thing that's really missing is a hairstyle that kind of comes down over his eyebrows. Kind of usually has like some messy, unkempt hair that kind of hangs down over those, but there's no hairstyle really like that in this game. So you can kind of get close, but it's not exact. So when it comes to the spells that we have for Ron, we actually have a wide variety of them. We have Accio, we have Transformation, we have Imperio, I know, and we have Expelliarmus. So we have 1 damage, 1 control, 1 force spell, as well as 1 unforgivable curse. So first up, we have Expelliarmus. This is obviously one of the spells that Harry, Hermione, and Ron all use throughout this series. And it's a staple in pretty much any student build. It's what they use throughout this series, so we have that here as well. And you can use this, again, to disarm enemies, melee enemies mostly, and then throw their weapon back at them. It's a good source of damage. And also what Ron Weasley build would be complete without transformation. It even has the icon of kind of how he mangled his rat cup back in the movie, so that makes perfect sense. And when you have the talent that allows you to create an exploding barrel, you basically one-shot the person that you convert to exploding barrel, and then you can take that barrel and throw it at an enemy, and usually one-shot that enemy as well. So that is a really deadly combo. It's more of an attack spell than it would seem once you have that talent, rather than a control spell, because you're going to get 2 kills out of it with just about every cast. And we have Accio here. What Ron Weasley build would be complete without Accio. This allows him to bring enemies to him, and obviously if you lift up a bunch of enemies in the air to you, and then you throw one of an exploding barrel in the middle of them, you can wipe out a lot of enemies, or you can just straight up attack them. It works really well either way. And lastly, we have the Imperio Curse, and you might be wondering, why are we having this in a Ron Weasley build? Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. First, he actually uses this spell when they're looking for the Hufflepuff Cup inside Gringotts Bank Vault. The Imperio Curse that Harry cast on the goblin there actually wore off, so he recast it to make sure that they don't get caught. And that's actually a thing. And also, I feel like he's probably the one out of the group that would play the fastest and the loosest with the, unforgivable curses. I know Harry uses them a lot, but I think he's the one who might actually use them to, further his means in general. And Imperio is really, really good for, just turning a target to your cause and making the fight a little bit easier. So if you use Transformation on one target and Imperio on another, you basically eliminated 2 targets from the fight instantly. And you can use this on hard to, kill enemies like trolls or the executioners that have a lot of health and make them wipe out targets for you. When it comes to talents for this build, we're obviously going to take the 4 masteries that improve the 4 spells that we're using for this build, but other talents that you want are things that improve curse duration, setting curses, etc. You're going to get a lot of damage from using Expelliarmus, from using Imperio to curse targets, and then deal extra damage to them. You're going to use the trait on your gear. You're going to use Unforgivable 3. That's going to make it so you deal extra damage to cursed targets. So when you hit a target with Expelliarmus, or you hit a target with Imperio, dealing damage to them will deal a lot more damage. And that's not just your spells, but also your ancient magic and also your basic attacks. And then lastly, we have Draco Malfoy. You can get his hair to look fairly similar to the way it is in the movies, with the light, slick back hair and then dark eyebrows. You can get something that looks somewhat close to him. You can also put your hood up on your robe if you kind of want to make it, feel a little bit more like a dark arts type wizard or something like that, or you can just, leave it down if you want. Now, he's obviously going to be a Slytherin house character, so if you enjoy playing Slytherin, then this might be a good build for you. Again, you don't necessarily have to play that house, but if you're fully cosplaying this character, that's the one you would choose. Now, when it comes to spells for Draco, it was hard picking out a bunch because he doesn't use a ton of spells that are in this game. But the ones that I selected for this build are Crucio, Expelliarmus, Depulso, and Incendio. The reason we have Expelliarmus in this build is because he uses it to disarm Dumbledore in the books when he faces him in the tower. Very, very important scene that plays out. So we have that here, and obviously it kind of makes sense for a student to have this spell. We have Depulso in this build because it's the closest thing that Malfoy used in the duel with Harry to Averte Statum, which is sort of the force spell he uses to knock him back when he cast it before 3, the count of 3. So this is the closest thing to that, and we use the talent for this to improve it, so it sort of does like an AoE when you're attacking enemies as well at close range. And you can use this spell to knock enemies off cliffs, or to push them into things to deal damage if they're floating in the air, or if they're high up to knock them off ledges and deal extra damage that way. Next we have the Incendio spell. This is a good fire damage close range spell. When you have Incendio Mastery, this is going to cast like a 360 degree AoE, good for dealing with undead and spiders. And the reason we have this one here is it's the closest thing I could think of to sort of his fire snake spell that you see later in the movies and books. And I just thought you need some sort of fire spell in this build to kind of complete it, and it's the closest thing to it. And lastly, we have Crucio. This is not a spell that he's actually cast before. If you remember the famous scene in the bathrooms where him and Malfoy and Harry Potter are duking it out with spells, he's actually about to cast this spell on Harry when Harry interrupts him with Sectum Sempra, causes him to start bleeding. So he didn't actually cast it, but he was trying to cast it, which is why we had it in this build. Again, there are a very limited amount of spells that fit him for this game. So this is one I thought he would probably use if he could, so that's why I have it in the build. And Crucio is really good in this build too. It takes a target that makes them basically cower and take damage over time, as well as increases your damage against them because they become cursed. And then if you take the, Crucio Mastery talent, then when you attack that target, it spreads that curse around to other targets as well, which make them take increased damage. So it's really, really good in this build and good for taking one target out of the fight. And when it comes to traits for him, you're also going to want to use Unforgivable 3 because you're going to be cursing with Crucio and you're going to be cursing with Expelliarmus. This allows you to spread that curse around and then deal extra damage with your regular attacks, and you get a lot of damage that way. So that wraps up our video on 3 more potential cosplay builds you can play from famous Harry Potter characters in this game. Thank you again to Warner Brothers for sponsoring this video. Again, if you guys want to pick up the game on PC, Xbox Series X and S, or PlayStation 5, you can use our link below to support the channel. If you guys like this sort of video, we could probably do a couple more of these showcasing other famous wizards and witches, making how we would play their builds in this game. But let me know if that's something you guys want to see, and if you want that, we will make that.